Welcome back, everybody. This time we're diving deep into Exchange Online and all the security updates they've announced.
A lot going on.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. There's that huge blog post from the Microsoft Exchange team, plus all the chatter it's generated online. But as always, we'll break it all down for you. So even if you're not super technical, you'll get what's changing and why it matters.
Exactly.
So right off the bat, I saw this thing called the Secure Future Initiative. Sounds kind of big, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. It's basically Microsoft saying, hey, we're going to make security a top priority across all our products. This Exchange Online stuff is just one piece of it.
So it's like a company-wide push.
Yep. And it shows they're taking the whole cybersecurity thing super seriously. Threats are getting more complex these days, so everyone needs to be more proactive, not just reacting, but getting ahead of the curve.
So it's not just about putting out fires anymore.
Nope. Got to prevent those fires in the first place.
Right. And that brings us to one of the, I guess, most urgent changes they mentioned, blocking RBAC app impersonation. February 2025, they said, and no exceptions.
No kidding. That one's a biggie.
But hold on, can we back up a sec? I gotta admit, I'm not entirely clear on what app impersonation even means. Sounds kind of scary, though.
I get it. So think of it like this. You've got an app, let's say it's for email archiving, and it needs to access your Exchange Online data.
Right, to do its job.
Exactly. Now, in the past, this app could basically pretend to be you like it was you when it accessed your mailbox.
Oh, so it's kind of sneaky.
Well, it was convenient, but it also made things kind of vulnerable security-wise. Because someone with bad intentions could use that impersonation thing to get their hands on sensitive data.
Makes sense. So by blocking app impersonation, Microsoft's like, nope, not going to risk it anymore.
Exactly. They're saying we need a more secure way to do this. But that means some organizations have to make big changes. Fast.
Yeah, February 2025 isn't that far off.
Nope. That's why Microsoft's telling everyone to check their systems, like right now. If you're using app impersonation, got to figure out how to change things before that deadline hits.
Yikes. So where should people even start with that?
Good question. Microsoft actually put out 3 message center notifications about this. MC72411STEEN, MC718754, and MC718746.
Okay, so those are the magic numbers.
Yep. Check your message center, see if any of those apply to you. And if they do, get moving.
No time to waste. But that's not the only big change coming, right? They're also saying goodbye to Exchange Web Services, or EWS, in October 2026.
Oh, yeah, that one's huge. EWS has been around forever. It's how developers talk to Exchange Online. So many apps rely on it, both Microsoft's and third-party ones.
I can't even imagine how many apps we're talking about. So what's Microsoft doing to help developers, make this switch?
Well, first off, they're doing it themselves. Microsoft's committed to getting their own apps off of EWS before that deadline. They're leading by example, which is good.
Right. So it's not just do as we say, not as we do.
Exactly. Plus, to help organizations figure out their own EWS situation, they're going to release new usage reports in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Early next year, I think.
Okay, so that'll help.
Yep, those reports will show exactly which apps are using EWS to get data, so you'll know what needs to be fixed.
That's a great resource, especially if your whole organization relies heavily on EWS. Now, I'm wondering, will everything in EWS have a new home over in Graph API? I remember reading something about gaps.
You're right, some things aren't so simple, like accessing archived mailboxes. Graph doesn't do that yet.
So some features are still in development?
Yep, but they're working on it. The tougher part is, some things just won't be in Graph at all.
Oh, so some things are just gone. What should people be prepared to lose?
A few management features are going away. Setting folder permissions, managing delegates, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You'll have to use PowerShell or other methods once EWS is gone.
Okay, so some devs are going to have to get creative.
For sure. And public folders, those are going to be way more restricted. No more creating or changing them through code after October 2026. Just access through Outlook clients and bulk import-export.
Got it. Sounds like a big shift. But hey, speaking of new approaches, let's talk about how Microsoft is handling app-only data access, this application RBAC thing. Yeah, what's the deal with that?
It's basically a way to let apps get the data they need without having to pretend to be a user.
Ah, so it's like the solution to the app impersonation problem we talked about.
It's much more secure. The idea is least privilege, only give an app access to the exact data it needs, nothing extra.
That's smart.
Right. So if there's a security breach, the potential damage is much less.
Makes sense. How do you set this application RBAC thing up, though?
Right now, it's PowerShell or the Microsoft Graph PowerShell module, but they're planning to put it right into the Entra ID admin experience.
So it'll be easier to manage.
Yep. much more user-friendly. And while we're on that topic, Outlook add-ins are changing too because of the whole EWS thing.
Right, those add-ins that rely on EWS or REST APIs have to move to this nested app authentication, NWA, and use Microsoft Graph.
Yep, another big shift.
So what's the timeline for that?
First big date is February 2025. They'll disable legacy tokens for everyone, but there's a catch.
Oh.
Admins can turn them back on temporarily if they really need to, like a grace period.
Okay, that makes sense.
But come June 2025, legacy tokens are gone for good. No more turning them back on. Then, October 2025, that's the end of the exception period. The final nail in the coffin, so to speak.
So the message is clear. Get those add-ins using NWA and Graph as soon as possible.
Exactly. And if you use third-party add-ins, make sure those vendors are on top of this too.
Right, it's a team effort. But wait, there's more. We also have some cool stuff happening with email security, SMTP DANE with DNSSEC.
Ah, yes. That's the good stuff.
I gotta be honest, those acronyms are making my head spin a bit. Can you break it down for us, simple folk?
Sure. So, Microsoft's been big on supporting these two security standards. DNSSEC, which stands for Domain Name System Security Extensions, a mouthful, I know.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And then there's DN, which is DNS-based authentication of named entities for SMTP. Basically, DNSSE is like a digital seal of authenticity for your DNS records. So attackers can't redirect your email to a fake server.
Makes sense. And DANE.
DANE builds on that, is make sure your email is properly encrypted and authenticated using special DNS records.
So it's like adding extra layers of protection to make sure your email doesn't end up in the wrong hands.
Precisely.
Very cool. When can people actually expect to see these enhancements?
Well, outbound SMTP DANE with DNSSEC rolled out back in February 2022. And just last month, inbound SMTP DANE with DNSSEC went live for everyone.
Wow, so email's getting a serious security boost. What's next?
Well, they're planning to make outbound SMTP NN mandatory in May 2025. So even stronger enforcement of those standards.
Great news for email security. Okay, one last thing before we take a breather. High volume email, or HVE, and that new oath support. What's the scoop?
HVE is all about sending tons of email, mostly internally, without hitting those pesky rate limits. It's still in public preview, but it could be a game changer, especially for companies still using on-premises servers with their hybrid exchange setup.
So HVE could replace those servers?
Potentially, yeah. And they added oath support during the public preview, which is huge.
Why is that?
Well, oath means better security, and it works seamlessly with Microsoft 365. So sending high-volume email is more secure and more efficient. Win-win.
Sounds great. If anyone's interested, there's a resource called OVE Auth Authentication for high-volume emails from Microsoft 365. Post had a handy summary table with all these changes, so let's go through it together. Make sure everyone has a clear timeline for action. Ready?
Sounds good. Let's start with RBAC app impersonation.
All right. That's being blocked in February 2025, no exceptions. Anything else we should add about that or move on?
I think it's worth saying again, this is happening soon, and it probably affects you. So seriously, go check those message center notifications.
Yeah, good reminder. We don't want anyone caught off guard. Okay, next is EWS going away in October 2026. Further out, but still needs planning. What's the main takeaway here?
This is a massive change. It's going to affect tons of applications. So start figuring out how to move to Graph API ASAP. Don't wait till the last minute.
Oh, solid advice. And remember, Microsoft's doing it themselves well ahead of time, so you're not alone in this. What's next?
Outlook add-ins and those legacy tokens. February 2025, they're disabled, but you can turn them back on for a bit.
Right, that grace period.
But June 2025, they're gone for good. Then October 2025, the exception period ends too. No more legacy tokens.
So start migrating to NWA and Graph now, and talk to your third-party add-in vendors. Make sure they're ready.
Definitely. Got to work together on this one.
Okay, let's recap those email security upgrades. SMTP DANE with DNSSEC. I know it sounds technical, but it's pretty simple. Can you remind us how they work?
Sure. DNSSEC prevents attackers from redirecting your email by using digital signatures to protect those DNS records. And then DANE makes sure your email is encrypted and properly authenticated using special DNS records. Double lock on your mailbox.
Love that analogy. And both outbound and inbound DANE with DNSSEC are already live. Outbound since February 2022, inbound since last month, and in May 2025, outbound becomes mandatory.
Yep, a big step for email security.
For sure. Okay, last one. High volume email, or HVE. Still in public preview, but sounds promising for large-scale email needs. What are the key benefits again?
Well, it's cloud-based, so could replace on-premises servers for some companies. And now it has OAuth support, which means better security and smoother integration with Microsoft 365. More secure and efficient.
Win-win. If you're curious, there's a resource called Oath Authentication for high-volume emails for Microsoft 365. Anything else from that summary table, or did we get it all?
I think we hit the main points.
Awesome. But remember, this is just a snapshot in time, you know? Technology changes fast, especially security. So stay informed.
Absolutely. The more you know, the better you can protect yourself.
Well said. So, how about this? With all these changes, how do organizations keep things secure without making them too hard to use?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a constant balancing act. We'll dive into that more in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
It's tricky, right? Gotta stay ahead of the bad guys, but can't forget about the people actually using these systems every day.
It's like, how do you build a super secure fortress that people actually want to live in?
Yeah.
But I think these updates from Microsoft are a good sign, right? Shows they're serious about this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Putting in the work to make Exchange Online safer for everyone.
And it's not just about the tech itself, is it? It's about how organizations think about security.
100%. It's gotta be part of everything you do from the start, not just an afterthought.
So how do companies actually make that happen? Create a real culture of security? Well, communication is huge. Everyone needs to be on the same page, top to bottom. Make sure they get why security matters and how they're part of it.
So it's not just, here are the rules, follow them.
Nope. It's about empowering people, giving them the right training and tools so they can spot those threats and know what to do if something's fishy.
Like building a human firewall, almost.
I like that. And it's not just about stopping attacks. It's also about what you do if something happens.
So having a good incident response plan is key.
Absolutely. Got to know who does what, how you'll talk to everyone involved, and the steps to contain the damage and get back on track.
Oof, that's a whole other deep dive, maybe someday. But for now, let's go back to that balance you mentioned between security and keeping things usable. What are some ways companies can actually do that?
One thing that helps is getting users involved early. When you're designing security stuff, get their feedback. See how it affects their work.
So don't just spring it on them.
Exactly. It makes people feel more ownership, like they're part of the solution. They'll be more likely to actually follow the security stuff if they had a say.
Plus, you might catch usability problems before they become a big deal.
Totally. Saves a lot of headaches later. Another thing, security training can't be a one-and-done thing.
Yeah, that yearly training video doesn't really cut it, does it?
Nope. Got to keep the conversation going. Regularly tell people about new threats, best practices, any changes to the rules.
And make it interesting, not just a bunch of tech jargon.
For sure. Real-world examples, case studies, even a bit of humor. Make it stick in their minds.
So it's about making security feel real to people, not just a bunch of rules.
Exactly. They need to see how it affects their own lives, why it matters to them. Now, there's one thing we hear about all the time, multi-factor authentication, or MFA.
Yeah, that seems like a simple but effective thing, right?
Absolutely. It's basically adding an extra layer of security. You need more than just your password to get in. So even if someone steals your password, they're still locked out.
Makes sense. So if you're not using MFA yet, get on that.
Definitely. One of the best things you can do. Now, switching gears a bit. Technology plays a big role in all this, too. We've seen some amazing advances lately, like AI and cloud-based security. What are some of the coolest things you're seeing?
Oh, yeah, the tech is getting wild.
Well, AI is a big one. Artificial intelligence. It can help automate a lot of the security work, like spotting threats and responding to them. And it can analyze huge amounts of data, find those patterns that humans might miss.
So it's like having an extra set of super smart eyes.
Pretty much. It's not about replacing humans, but making them better, helping them focus on the important stuff.
Makes sense. And we're seeing more cloud-based security solutions too, right? What's the advantage there?
Well, the cloud is super flexible. You can scale it up or down as needed, and it's usually more affordable than doing everything yourself. Plus, you get access to the latest and greatest tech and experts.
You see, you don't have to build your own Fort Knox.
Exactly. Let the experts handle it.
But of course, people worry about data privacy in the cloud.
Right, that's a valid concern. But the good cloud providers, they take security very seriously. They invest tons of money to protect your data.
So do your homework, choose a provider with a good track record.
Absolutely. Don't just go for the cheapest option. Look for a provider who's got the chops to keep your data safe.
Good advice. Now, got to talk about something that's been all over the news. Ransomware. Seems like those attacks are happening more and more. What can people do to protect themselves?
Prevention is key. right? Strong security basics. Multi-factor authentication, keep your systems updated, train your people.
So all that stuff we talked about earlier.
Yep, it all helps. But also, you got to have a plan if you do get hit. Backups are crucial. Make sure you can restore your data if the worst happens.
And I bet communication is important too, letting people know what's going on.
Absolutely. Be transparent. Tell people what happened and what you're doing about it.
So be prepared for the worst, but hope for the best.
Exactly. You can't stop every attack, but you can minimize the damage and bounce back quicker if you've got a plan.
That's a great point to remember. Being prepared is everything in this cybersecurity world. We'll talk more about building strong defenses in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned. It's crazy how much security's changed, even just in the last couple years. Feels like we're in a whole new world.
I know, right? The threats are like constantly evolving, so we have to keep up. It's a never-ending race.
Which brings us back to that question. How do companies stay secure without making things a total pain to use? It's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah.
You don't want so much security that people can't get anything done. But you can't just ignore security because it's easier either. Got to find that middle ground.
So what can companies actually do to find that balance?
One thing is to think about risk. What are the most important things in your organization, the stuff you absolutely can't afford to lose? Focus your security efforts on those.
So don't treat everything the same.
Exactly. You got to prioritize. Figure out what's mission critical and put your strongest defenses around that.
Okay, that makes sense. And once you know what those crown jewels are, what then?
Then you figure out what the risks are. What could go wrong? How likely is it? What would happen if it did go wrong? Once you know that, you can build the right defenses.
It's like a game of strategy, almost. Gotta stay one step ahead.
Totally. That's why it's so important to stay up to date on the latest threats. Those bad guys, they're always coming up with new tricks.
So reading those security blogs, it's not just for the tech nerds anymore.
Nope. Everyone needs to have some basic security knowledge.
And it's not just about the technical stuff either, right? There's the human factor, too.
Oh, yeah. Social engineering attacks, where they trick people into giving up info, those are on the rise. Got to teach people how to spot those and not fall for them.
It's all about building that culture of security. Everyone's going to be on guard, looking out for themselves and the company.
Exactly. And it starts at the top. Leaders have to make security a priority, set a good example.
And it's not just about making rules. People need to feel okay about speaking up if they see something suspicious.
Absolutely. You want people to feel empowered, like they can say something without getting in trouble.
So important. Lots of breaches could be stopped if people just felt more comfortable talking about it.
Totally agree. And that goes hand in hand with having a good incident response plan.
Right, because even with the best security, stuff happens. Got to know what to do when it does.
Exactly. Your incident response plan, it tells you what to do to limit the damage, investigate what happened, and get your systems and data back up and running.
And how to communicate with everyone involved, right? Customers, stakeholders, all that.
For sure. Transparency is key. People need to know what went down and how you're fixing it.
Well, we've covered a lot today, from the technical details of those Exchange Online updates to the bigger picture of how to build strong security. Anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
Just remember, security is a journey, not a destination. The threats never stop changing, so you always got to be adapting and improving your defenses.
It's like that saying, eternal vigilance is the price of something important. Applies to cybersecurity too, I guess.
For sure. Can't just set it and forget it. Got to constantly monitor your systems, update everything, and keep educating people.
Great advice. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Just remember, this was all as of November 21st, 2024. Things change fast in the security world, so keep learning, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.